A Peek Behind EU Careers Student Ambassadors is a mini podcast series by the European Personnel Selection Office, EPSO. It is recorded in the studios of the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission in Brussels. Good morning. Welcome to A Peek Behind EU Career Student Ambassadors, a mini podcast series by the European Personnel Selection Office, EPSO, during which we will get to know some of the fantastic student ambassadors that help EPSO with its outreach activities. The series, A Peek Behind EU Careers, during which we interviewed a number of staff working for the European Union institutions and bodies, was at the origin of this new mini podcast series. And I should say, also upon the suggestion of one of our student ambassadors. And that ambassador is the one I'm going to interview today, Eric Alexandrie, who is at the University of Stockholm in Sweden, doing a master's in law. I would start by asking you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Of course. So you introduced me quite well there, Luis. So Eric is my name. I am the ambassador at Stockholm University. Currently done it for 2 years now. I'm not sure how much people know about the role, but I can just mention the role is to promote EU careers at the university and to make sure that students get informed about the opportunities to work.
You have been a student ambassador already since October 2023. So I could call you one of our senior student ambassadors.
Yeah.
What was it about this role that made you want to stay and do another academic year after the first one?
So I can just start by mentioning when I started the role, I had no previous experience of EU, so I did not know very much what to expect. All I did know was I was very interested in EU policy, and I thought it was a great opportunity to get to know other people who were also interested and also meet EU officials. And I thought the first year was very exciting. I met so many interesting people, and I just wanted to keep doing that. So I enjoyed very much the role, and therefore I continued to.
Where did you find out about the program? Was it online? Was it through word of mouth? How did you learn about the Student Ambassadors program by EPSO?
So I actually started studying law in 2022 in the autumn, and mostly my law program is focused on domestic law, and I wanted to have more a dimension of EU. So I thought in which way I could in some way learn more about EU, and I started to Google a lot, and then I was very lucky to actually find this opportunity, and there was a spot also at Stockholm University, which I studied, that was open for application. So I applied, and I was very lucky to be the one to be chosen.
What was the first memory that comes to your mind of being a student ambassador that you might wish to share with our listeners?
So I think one of the exciting thing of being an EU ambassador is that you meet so many people, and in some way you meets things that you maybe not expect. So when you join the role as an EU ambassador, the first thing you do is you go for a trip to either Luxembourg or Brussels, where you meet the other ambassadors in EU. So in October 2024, I was in Brussels. And one of those moments has really stick to me was actually meeting some of the Dutch ambassadors, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I thought it was quite fun was the last night we had this dinner party. So I went with the Swedish ambassadors, but it felt very important to me also to speak with other ambassadors. So I do have a very strong memory that I was like, okay, I just sit at a random table. And I sat down with the Dutch, I do remember. And of course, that was a bit nervous because are they going to speak English with me? How am I going to adapt to this situation? But they were super kind. And I think that moment. It really captures the like essence of being an EU career ambassador. You meet so many people that are open to other people, and so that is a very fun memory.
The social aspect of the program for you is clearly very important. You would describe yourself as someone who enjoys meeting people, enjoys being with people. And would that be one of the features that you think is important for anyone planning to join the program?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an advantage if you like to hang out with people. I mean, of course, during the like a conference when we were in Brussels or Luxembourg, we do like activities during the day, have like seminars and stuff. But then during the night, like the evening, we do hang out a lot, and it's a great way to connect with people. So I think in order to enjoy the full experience, I definitely think you should be like to talk to people, because I think it's good to be social, but I also think in some way it's kind of good to also be like self-autonomous. Like you, in this role, you are often alone, so you have to make many decisions on your own, and you can't always wait for someone to give you directions. So I think like the combination of being very social, but also like very like autonomous.
Has the program helped you get to that point where you can say, well, I can take an event by myself and roll with it without the need for much support? Is that something that you've noticed?
Yeah, I definitely think the role has developed me in that sense. I also noticed that a lot of the work I did last year makes it so much easier for me this year. So, for example, when I took over the role, there was like no Stockholm University ambassador. So I had to create a new social media account. I had to sit in all these meetings with different partners, such as the Commission, the Europe Direct. In some way, that was a bit difficult because you had to introduce yourself and make sure that they actually trust you and that you're gonna do the job. And I noticed this year that many of them actually like are the ones calling me, like sending email to me. So I noticed that in many ways now that a lot of like the work I just did last year are actually like accumulating for me now. So in that way, I feel like also I developed skill, but at the same time, it's also a bit easier than it was the first year for me, at least.
What's your experience like of talking to other Swedes about the possibility of joining the EU institutions?
I think this is a very interesting question because I think it differs a lot depending on which university you are and which country. So, for example, if you are in Portugal, Spain, or Italy, you might not have the same problem as you have if you're in a university like Stockholm. One of the challenges I will say in Sweden is that in general, our like recruitment process for jobs are quite short. You get an interview quite quick and then you get a job offer. While in EU, when you apply for a role, then you often have to wait a few months before you get an offer, right? I think that's been a bit tricky for some graduates. And I think also like Sweden has like very high standards. Like I think also people get very how do you say, comfortable staying here. So that's also one of the difficulty to like convince them to move to another location.
I wanted to ask you about your pitch, Eric, because obviously you're telling me about the challenges that, if I understood you correctly, people find the process a bit long compared to the situation in Sweden, that people are also sometimes not so open to the idea of maybe moving abroad, leaving their comfort zone. So, what is it that you tell your fellow students about the many opportunities that we have on offer at EU level? How do you deal with those challenges?
So I think one of the things is that EU has very many opportunities. For example, if you take people with technical background, I often think they assume it's just people with law degrees or people studying political science that work at EU. There's so many things you can do. You don't even have to work at the EU Commission. You can work at the European Environment Agency, work with environment policy. You can work on AI policy. You can work on defense policy. So there's like very many niches that you can choose based on your interest. I think that is one big advantage of like applying for EU roles. Another thing is, as we have talked before about, it's just so diverse environment. I think Brussels, Luxembourg are like very unique places to live, and I think you can maybe get that somewhere else in the world, but in at least not in Europe. It's so diverse and so exciting environment. So I would say definitely if you are a person that cares about having an impact on policy, I think EU is the best place to be.
Well, it leads me to almost an obvious question. Listening to you talking, sharing your pitch with us, makes me think that you yourself might wish to come and join the EU Public Service. Am I right?
Yeah, you're correct about that, Luis. So, in my case, one of the things I'm very excited about is technology and law. So, I do believe we live in a time where like technology can improve us for us very much in like healthcare, in education. But there's also very many risks with technology. It could be used in malicious ways. We also have to make sure it's fully in line with our values when we use the technology. So, I think for me, my what I would want to do with my skill set is to make sure that the AI development is developed in a responsible way.
I hear you talk about technology, and of course, inside my mind, I'm thinking about artificial intelligence, which is very much one of the things that is currently on the table. Is there an institution that you would like to work for? There's, for instance, the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Office, which has been created just in 2024, where all of these issues are obviously on the agenda.
Yeah, definitely the AI office is one I have in mind. That's also one thing to think about when you also choose like career in EU. That EU policy also has this called Brussels effect, meaning that whenever you like implement a policy, often other parts of the world also follow, like the US and Asia and Africa. So you also have like possibility to change policy outside the borders of EU. And in the same way, when it comes to AI policy, I think it's just so important the work that AI office does, just to make sure that we don't have like these super powerful AI systems that go malicious or they go rogue. So I think AI office is probably the place I would go, but there's also many other opportunities, right? It's like also many think tanks in Brussels as well that you can also go to.
Right. There are many so called satellite organizations, certainly here in Brussels and in Luxembourg, that work on EU related matters. So there is indeed an ecosystem, let's put it that way, that gives people with an interest in EU policies many opportunities to put in practice their skills and interests. I wanted to go back to the Student Ambassadors Program and to the training conference. You said at the beginning of our conversation that you had the opportunity to participate in two of those events because you've been with us since October 2023, the first time in Luxembourg and then in Brussels. If somebody's listening to us and thinking, okay, I might go to Luxembourg or Brussels if I'm selected, what can they expect? What was it that attracted you about those events?
So the social aspect is, of course, one as you mentioned. I think one other is that you also get to meet so many EU officials. You maybe know the term for this, Luis, but I do remember you had this thing where you sat down at a table with like 8 other ambassadors or something, and then you talked to an EU official, and then you switch table like after 8 minutes or something. What was it called?
Speed networking.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to be confused with speed dating. It's speed networking, but you've described it very well.
So we did that, and I thought it was so good because we met so many different EU officials that worked on so many like different departments. So some of them worked on like AI policy, as we talked about before. Some of them worked on more like environmental policy. Some were translators. There's like so many diverse backgrounds, and you got really like the possibility to ask questions to them about things that you actually wondered. So I think that's definitely one of the highlights for me during these like conferences.
Let's talk about some of the work that you've been doing in parallel to your role as student ambassador for EU Careers. The Brussels effect. You mentioned it a while ago, but I know that this is something that is actually a project that you've started recently. What is the Brussels effect?
So the Brussels Effect is a blog that I co-founded with an earlier EU career ambassador called Maria Ianu. The idea of the blog is that we want to make sure that young people are able to express their voice, so they can write articles for us. And the other is also just giving them more credentials. So if you write an article, let's say about AI policy or environmental policy, that's a great way to actually show that you have demonstrated skills. Because one of the hard difficulties of getting a job at EU or really anywhere is that young people lacks credentials, right? And in order to get credentials, you often have to have credentials, right? So me and Maria, we try to break this circle of okay, let's create a blog where actually people can express their opinions and at the same time have something to showcase to EU institutions or wherever they want to go.
So, if you're listening to this podcast, the Brussels effect is open to all. If you have interesting thoughts that you want to put on paper and share with the world, you can very quickly Google the Brussels effect and you can get in touch with Eric and his co founder Maria and join this endeavor. Eric, I wanted to talk a little bit about studying in Stockholm, studying at the University of Stockholm. Many of the people listening to us may never have been to Stockholm. Can you tell us a little bit about Stockholm and then a little bit about your university?
So obviously I'm biased. I was born in Stockholm, so I have a very close, fond relationship to the city. Stockholm is very beautiful. It has this old architecture, and at the same time they have water all over the city. So during the summer, it's a great time to be there. Like you can just go stroll around the city, and you can go to and bath in the water. You have all these cafes, bars that you can sit outside, and it's quite perfect temperature during that time. It's 25 degrees or something. Stockholm University is also a nice university. You can see definitely there's a diversity there as well, with students also coming from other countries. It's quite big university. I think we're the biggest in Sweden. So I think definitely if you have the opportunity, people should come here.
Right, but even though it sounds that it is indeed a very appealing, attractive city, you are thinking about maybe one day moving to Brussels or to Luxembourg.
So I think in my case, when it comes to Stockholm, I would say the maybe biggest disadvantage is partly actually the weather during the winter. I'm quite sensitive for 20 minus degrees. I think the weather is definitely better in Brussels and Luxembourg, but also the proximity to other cities, right? You can just go by train to Amsterdam, you can go to Paris, and all these amazing cities, and just have it so nearby. Also, I think Stockholm is obviously very diverse background of people living here, but I think it can't compare to a city like Brussels or Luxembourg, which is so diverse.
Eric, we're coming to the end of our conversation, and I must obviously ask you about your personal advice to anyone listening to us thinking about applying to the EU Career Student Ambassadors Program by EPSO. So, what would be the 2, 3 tips that you would like to share with us that anyone planning to apply should have in mind?
Probably just have in mind that you can't have everything staked out. You don't have to have a EU career background or something like that. You can just be interested in EU, right? That's I think one thing to imagine, because I imagine people maybe look at my credentials and think okay, this is a guy that was basically born in Brussels or something, but that's definitely not the case. So you shouldn't think too much about the credentials. Also, I think just sometimes it's, as my father used to say to me when I was a kid, sometimes you just have to like expose yourself to randomness in some sense, right? You don't really know exactly what's going to happen after you apply and if you get the role, but it's like that's also what's so exciting about it, right? You are like drawn into this whole new world. And I know from my like from my perspective, I think I've changed a lot after the role and what I want to do. So there's not very often you get that opportunity in life. So I think definitely if you are a person that likes to push yourself and do something new, you should definitely take the opportunity.
Eric, as I said, we're coming to the end, but maybe there's something that I didn't ask you about that you would like to share. And this would be a great opportunity as we wrap up for you to add something that you think is important.
I can just conclude by saying that if you are a person that are social and curious on EU, yes, don't hesitate to like apply for the role. I know so many people that were very skeptical that they would get the role, and then they end up getting the role and later on did a fantastic job as ambassadors. So I think that's something to have in mind. That just don't underestimate yourself and also dare to take some risks.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. It was a real pleasure to get to know you a bit more, to talk to you. Obviously, we at EPSO are very grateful for all that you do, as we are grateful in relation to all the other ambassadors. Once more, thank you so much for reaching out to us and suggesting that we do this mini series. It's really because of you that we are here today. So I wish you all the very best.
Thanks for having me. It's been great, Luis.